What is the big society? How do we define it? The big society is a society in which we, as individuals, don't feel small. In a big society, everyone should feel empowered and supported. Big, in other words. So does our society actually pass this test at the moment? Sadly not. As Nat has touched on, individuals and communities have become three things. They've become less trusting, they've become less empowered, and they've become increasingly divided. So only a third of people agree that, generally speaking, most people can be trusted, which halves the score recorded in 1959. Fewer than 2 in 5 members of the public actually think they're able to influence local issues in their square mile, which coincides with the number of people engaged in any kind of civic action. And only 1 in 33 of us take a formal part in any kind of civic society role, such as attending public meetings. Work done on the census data by the BBC shows that 97% of communities have got weaker since 1971. But this is not, to reiterate, bad news. Today is about good news. And the good news is that we now have more people out there in the streets as we're speaking, in our local neighbourhoods, with the potential to be change agents than ever before. For example, 5.5 million people work either partly or wholly from home. And I have to say to you, after years of being in corporate structures and agencies, I went to work at home, and the sound of the front door shutting, and if you're lucky, the suburban whine of a milk float, and knowing that you're alone in a back office in a suburban street, is a terrifying thing for somebody with all the advantages I've had. So what it's like for other people who are old, lonely, disabled, I dread to think. And that's what started me down the road of the big lunch and here today. There are many more people who are semi-retired and retired with a wealth of ideas, a lifetime of wisdom that's undervalued, and lots of energy that isn't being used. How do we encourage them, and indeed the rest of the society, to get out from behind our famous twitching curtains, our shyness, our indifference, our inactivity, and transform the square mile where they live? The first thing we need to do is to change attitudes. We have to dispel the idea that you have to be a particular kind of community person, in inverted commas, or be from a particular kind of background, confident, educated, or have loads of time, actually, in order to change things. We can encourage people to be active in their community variously because they can make an enjoyable use of something that is a hobby or a passion. They can turn a painful life experience, which they may have just simply survived or may have mastered, into a mentoring experience for somebody else going through the same thing. They can reduce their loneliness. 1 in 3 households in England and Wales are single-person households, and actually increase their self-esteem. And if for no other reason, they can understand that taking civic action is practical and it will save them money. Secondly, we need to recognise that people need to start with baby steps, some visceral, uplifting experience of community, rather than a disappointing attempt to be worthy. So many people, and Nat's described one example, so many people feel, I'll be good now. I'll go and help on a volunteering helpline, and then they have an incredibly difficult experience. If they get past the checks, and then discover that, they're perhaps not equipped to do the thing they volunteered for. So we held the first big lunch last year. It was an idea that Tim Smith at the Eden Project and I sat down and discussed 3 years ago and made a reality in the middle of a recession. We had over 8,000 events. We had events in Toxteth and Liverpool, on the same boulevards where the Toxteth riots took place, with people from 65 different nationalities, down to tiny little events. 1 in 3 people of the 730,000 people that took part rated the experience 10 out of 10. And many of them have gone on from just sitting down and having lunch with their neighbours, playing music, watching their kids play safely in a street as a social space, not a transport system. They're now getting things done in other ways. We Are What We Do, which I helped found, has encouraged 5 million simple actions like shop locally or talk to somebody of another generation. Those are just 2 examples of very simple things which are visceral, they're theatrical, they get people together, they are fun, they're enjoyable. You don't have to be a certain type of person to take part. And when you've captured people in that way and given them a live sense of community again, you can move forward. The third thing we need to do is life stage, is look at life stage. For a young child, the big society might most importantly be being mentored at school, or mentoring in some way, however informal or formal, or safe areas to play, including the street perhaps one day. For people who are semi-retired or retired, it might be leading support for community charities. It's certainly being the elders and respected, and not the elderly and ignored. Society can be changed, in fact arguably can only be changed, by the aggregation of those individual, local, simple, enjoyable actions, and they can have national, in fact international difference. To do this, we need to live more locally, and we need to enjoy living more locally. 40% of the people who took part in the Big Lunch said they know that we need to live more locally. Strong communities can take collective action on energy, transport, crime, growing food, local shops. We need the rebirth of the milkman, the postman, the lollipop lady, the library, the community hall, the post office, and yes, the friendly local pub, 2,500 of which have closed very recently. The people and places which, as Nat says, we get a sense of collective local identity. And that is where we can make isolation history. That is where we can make inactivity history. The fourth thing is we need to give citizens, and that's what today's launch is all about, an enormous helping hand. Practical advice, resources, incentives. The network is about collaboration, a unique collaboration of government, business, charities, and active citizens, a four-legged approach. This network is being set up by a group of social entrepreneurs, you could say in one sense, but actually all we are is frustrated citizens. For frustrated citizens. It's to help everyone change things in their local area. Think of it as an enormous toolbox of practical advice, and we're going to use everything within the power of the internet, mobiles, but most of all face-to-face action to make this work. We want to increase the number of citizens engaged in social action by a significant factor. And we're going to be helped by two things you might be surprised for me to talk about, or not, and that's anger and frustration. There is a very narrow window of opportunity in this country to make creative use of the anger and frustration at the loss of public trust. And we can use that to shape a new form of real democracy. A real democracy in which, for example, there might be video booths in every shopping mall or pub or citizens' advice bureau for people to spontaneously record their ideas about community, often in anger, but often very constructively, in which we have a revival of the visceral power of public debates and meetings. There are 93,000 square miles in the UK, approximately. We tend to hear only about two of them, the City and Westminster. The Big Society network is about the other 92,998. We want to help people whether they want to get a new pedestrian crossing put in place, because children have been killed in their road in the last 5 years, to fight rising crime, to have more influence over their child's school or set up a new school, to help the lonely pensioners feel connected and appreciated, and to change the spending priorities of their local authority, or at the very least, get them to recycle Tetra Pak cartons. We want people to help with that practical first step, maybe as an individual. We then want to help them join an existing group or start a new one. And if they register that action, and or group with us, we will enrol them, as Nat said, as a shareholder, literally a shareholder, in the Big Society network. And that means they'll be entitled to receive rewards, dividends if you like, because the network will be a provident society. That's how we'll set it up. The largest cooperative or mutual in Britain. Indeed, a mutual that is increasingly Britain. Those dividends could be, for example, free resources, buildings, advice from your local authority, access to funds. Private businesses will be sponsoring us, we hope, there were some here today, who provide their own prizes, discounted goods and services. So you don't have to be especially good to join our movement, you just have to be practical. We will set up a contact platform where by just using your postcode and your passion, you're connected to advice, case histories, help, resources. A campaign platform that helps you fundraise, form groups, keep them going, keep them growing. And a feedback platform so that we actually get citizens reporting back on things they're involved in or come across, so that we have positive and constructive feedback as well. We aim to have 15 million members by 2020. Now you may think that's very ambitious, but as somebody who spent 20 years working on things like Comic Relief, Time Bank and the Big Lunch, it is possible. It's possible if you're intelligent, funny, engaging, honest, slightly self-deprecating, quite informal. You reward people with fun and recognition. You use the power of refined selfishness. We launched Time Bank on the basis of the mentor getting as much out of the experience as the mentee, and doing an awful lot to help them practically, but a light hand on the tiller. So here's a glimpse of what we're trying to do. This is our logo. Our logo is based on the idea of finding type. It's the idea of finding letters in various places in our daily lives, wherever it might be, that make up the Big Society as a name, and then putting them together as a montage. So we've done our own versions, both still and animated, as you can see behind me, and we will encourage other people up and down the land. So every kid, every pensioner, anybody, they can crochet it, they can stitch it, they can find it and photograph it, but our logo is an activity. It's all about practical engagement. Go and make your own Big Society logo. So in and of itself, I wouldn't normally make a big thing of a logo, even though I come from that background, but it is symbolic of the entire movement. Here is a glimpse of our website, which launches today. It's just a start, and that's all it is, but it's an important start. So it gives people a sense of the essence of the network, invites them to register with us, meet us, and help us to shape the best resource for them.